Prophet Yusuf. Prophet Yusuf, peace be upon him, was the beloved son of Prophet Yaqub, peace be upon him, who also had 11 other sons. Binyamin, who was the youngest, was from the same mother as Yusuf, while the rest were older half-brothers. When Prophet Yusuf was a young boy, he woke up one morning stunned by a mysterious dream he just had. He ran to his father in excitement and said, "Oh, my father, I have seen 11 stars and the sun and the moon. I saw them prostrating to me." Prophet Yaqub was overjoyed in realization that his dear son Yusuf was indeed the chosen one by Allah to the prophethood. However, Yaqub was concerned about his older son's possible reaction to this dream. For even though he treated them the same, he knew they all secretly had jealousy towards their younger brother Yusuf. He therefore warned Yusuf against telling his dream to his brothers, for they may harm him in the future. As time went on, the hatred and evil intentions in the hearts of Yusuf's brothers kept growing. They envied Yusuf because they felt he was special, and they were not. Unable to handle their emotions, they thought of a plan to get rid of Yusuf by throwing him into a well. So one day they approached their father and suggested that he sends Yusuf to come with them on a trip outside. Yaqub was skeptical of the brothers as he feared for Yusuf's safety. Reluctantly, he agreed, and then the next day, Yusuf set off with his brothers. They traveled far in pursuit of a well deep enough to throw their brother in. When they finally reached the well, they pretended to all go and retrieve some water. They led him to it, which they then grabbed him. Yusuf began struggling and pleaded with them to let go. The brothers eventually outpowered Yusuf and threw him down the well and rushed back home. The brothers reached and ran to their father carrying Yusuf's shirt that was smeared with sheep's blood. They cried, "Oh, our father, indeed we went racing with each other and left Yusuf with our possessions, and a wolf ate him." Yaqub was suspicious of their story. He in his heart believed his son was still alive and that the brothers were likely enticed by Shaitan, Satan, to do evil. He pointed out that if the wolf was to have actually killed Yusuf, the t-shirt would have been ripped up while attacking him. Yaqub maintained faith and patience and prayed every day for his son's safe return. Meanwhile, Yusuf managed to cling onto a stone ledge. He prayed and begged to Allah to grant him salvation. Soon a caravan that was on its way for Egypt stopped at this well to fetch some water. As they pulled the bucket up, they were shocked to see the boy clinging onto the rope. The caravan people realized the beauty that Yusuf possessed and began to discuss amongst themselves to take him in as a slave. Immediately, they then shackled Yusuf and took him along to Egypt. Here, he was auctioned and sold as a slave to the highest bidder, who happened to be the treasurer, Al-Aziz. Yusuf's new master, who had no children, was completely taken with Yusuf. He told his wife to take good care of Yusuf, and they could either use him as slave or take him for a son. Years went by. Yusuf not only grew up to be a handsome young man, but was also blessed with exceptional knowledge and wisdom by Allah. His honesty won the heart of Al-Aziz, who placed Yusuf in charge of his household. During this period, Yusuf was confronted with his second trial. Zuleika, Al-Aziz's wife, who watched Yusuf day after day, began to feel passionately about him. Her obsession heightened to a degree where she was desperate to fulfill her desire. One day, when her husband was away from home, she closed the doors and invited Yusuf to her. Yusuf, fearing Allah, replied, "I seek refuge in Allah. Indeed, He is my master who has given me shelter. Indeed, wrongdoers will not succeed." He turned away and ran towards the closed door to escape. Zuleika chased after him in desperation and grabbed his shirt from the back, which caused his shirt to rip. The door opened and Al-Aziz entered. Ahmed, she ran to him, cried and accused Yusuf of trying to force her into something she didn't want to do and kept resisting. Yusuf was baffled. He continued to deny his mistress's claim, saying, "It was she who sought to seduce me." Al-Aziz was a fair man. He was confused and unsure of whom to believe, so he consulted his wife's cousin for advice. "If his shirt is torn from the front, then she has told the truth, and he is of the liars," advised the cousin. However, his shirt was ripped from the back, meaning she was the forceful one. Yusuf's innocence was then proven. Al-Aziz apologized for his wife's indecency, but swore Yusuf to keep the situation a secret. Despite this, the story of Zuleika's and Yusuf began to spread. Other women began ridiculing her character. Distressed, Zuleika planned to prove to them her helpless reaction to Yusuf's extraordinary handsomeness. So she then invited some women to a banquet at her residence one day. There she served them fruit along with knives. When the women were happily chatting away while slicing fruits, Zuleika summoned Yusuf. The women looked up at him, astonished at such angelic beauty. They cut their hands without even realizing they had. Zuleika seized the moment to announce that this was the man for whom she was blamed. She then warned Yusuf that if he denied her again, he would be imprisoned, to which Yusuf replied, "My lord, prison is more to my liking than that to which they invite me." That night, Zuleika convinced her husband that the only way to safeguard her honor and his prestige was to imprison Yusuf. Thus, Yusuf was thrown into jail. During Yusuf's time in jail, he was bestowed with the ability to interpret dreams. Two of Yusuf's cellmates, mesmerized by his piety, asked him to have their dreams explained. One dreamt that he was serving the king wine, and the other was carrying bread on his head which two birds were eating up. Yusuf initially called them to Allah, then interpreted, "O two companions of prison, as for one of you, he will give drink to his master of wine, but as for the other, he will be crucified, and the birds will eat from his head." And he said to the one whom he knew would go free, "Mention me to your master." However, when he got out, Shaitan made him forget to mention Yusuf to his master, and thus Yusuf remained in prison for several years. One day the king of Egypt had an odd dream, and he summoned his men and asked them to explain to him the dream. The servant, who immediately remembered his companion in prison, informed the king of Yusuf and his impeccable dream interpretations. The king sent off his servant to prison to meet with Yusuf and inquire about the peculiar dream. Yusuf was overjoyed at the sight of his companion and knew that this was indeed the plan of Allah. He told him that the dream meant that you will plant for 7 years consecutively, and what you harvest leave in its spikes, except a little from which you will eat. Then will come after that 7 difficult years, which will consume what you saved for them, except a little from which you will store. Then will come after that a year in which the people will be given rain, and in which they will press olives and grapes. Amazed, the king ordered Yusuf to be presented before him. Yusuf, however, refused to leave prison until his innocence was proved. The king thus summoned the women relating to Yusuf's incident. The women who had their hands cut spoke of Yusuf's innocence before the king. "Allah forbid, we know about him no evil." The wife of Al-Aziz was trapped. She then confessed to the king, "Now the truth has become evident. It was I who sought to seduce him, and indeed, he is truthful." Thus, Yusuf's innocence was then proven. Released from prison, Yusuf stood before the king to thank him for his generosity. The king, who was greatly impressed by Yusuf's honest mannerisms and his pleasant personality, led him to being appointed as the storekeeper over the storehouses across his land. As in charge, Yusuf immediately acted and began to harvest and store crops for the 7 years of fertility. Then there approached the years of famine that spread so far it reached the household of Yaqub in Canaan. Yaqub then decided sent all his sons except Binyamin to Egypt to purchase provisions. Yusuf immediately recognized his brothers and provided for them, but kept his identity disguised. He casually inquired about their family. The brothers informed the Yusuf of their house back in Canaan and their father and brother back home. Yusuf informed them to bring their younger brother along next time, or they shall receive no further provisions. He also placed the money they had paid with their supplies as an incentive to return. The brothers returned home and said, "O our father, measure has been denied to us, so send with us our brother so that we will be given provisions again, and indeed we will be his guardians." Yaqub was enraged. How could he trust them when they had failed him terribly with Yusuf before? After some time, however, their needs pressed Yaqub to send Binyamin with them for more provisions and took their oath to safeguard him. When they reached Egypt, Yusuf drew Binyamin aside and whispered into his ear, "Indeed, I am your brother, so do not despair over what they used to do to me." Yusuf filled his brother's bags with grain. He then secretly planted the king's golden bowl in Binyamin's bag. On departing, the brothers were stopped by the king's soldiers who were looking for the king's missing cup. The bags of the brothers were searched, and the missing cup was retrieved from the bag of the youngest brother. Binyamin. The soldiers cried, "Indeed, you are thieves!" The brothers were shocked. The brothers immediately remembered their sick father back home and their vow to safeguard Binyamin at all cost. They begged the soldiers to release their younger brother and take one of them instead, but the soldiers refused. The eldest among the brothers said, "I will not leave this land until my father permits me or Allah decides for me." So the rest of the brothers left Egypt, leaving the eldest behind. When Yaqub learnt of his youngest son's predicament, he wept and wept until he became blind. He resorted to prayer for comfort, for he knew that only Allah could ease his pain. Soon, he instructed his sons to return to the king's land and inquire about their brother. The sons returned to Egypt once again. They met with Yusuf and pleaded that tragedy had befallen them. Yusuf then spoke to them in their native language. "Do you know what you did with Yusuf?" It didn't take long for the brothers to realize that this was indeed their long-lost brother and began to tremble in fear. But Yusuf comforted them, saying, "May Allah forgive you." He then said, "Take this, my shirt, and cast it over the face of my father. His eyesight will return." As instructed, the brothers casted Yusuf's shirt over their father's face, and Allah miraculously restored his eyesight. They begged their father to seek Allah's forgiveness for them. Together, they all set off to Egypt, where Yusuf warmly welcomed them. Yusuf raised his father upon the throne and said, "O my father, this is the explanation of my vision of before. My Lord has made it reality, and he was certainly good to me when he took me out of prison and brought you here after Satan had induced estrangement between me and my brothers. Indeed, my Lord is subtle in what he wills. Indeed, it is he who is the knowing, the wise." Thus, Allah reunited father and son. The lesson from the story of Prophet Yusuf is that from his dream, knew he was destined for greatness, but it seemed at every turn of his life he was met with difficulties and adversity. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold as slave, and unjustly imprisoned. Yusuf could have chosen to be bitter and question Allah by saying, "I thought you had ordained for me greatness." He could have easily complained and asked, "Why do these things keep happening to me?" But he knew better. He knew Allah had a plan for him, and he had to just keep faith. Yusuf knew by just focusing on being the best he could, treating people right and with respect, doing more than what was requested, that Allah would take care of him. That is end of the